Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mind Movers. Today I am so excited and privileged to have my life coach with me. I feel like I'm a bit weird saying that because there's definitely different thoughts that come to mind when people think of coaches. But this is Alex, and I've known Alex since I was about 19 years old. So we went to Leeds University together, and he is a transformative coach and facilitator specializing in self-leadership, relational dynamics, and rites of passage. I approached Alex because when I remember him at university, he was at the forefront of nightlife. He was running events. He was the person that you go to if you wanted to go to the best parties. And Alex definitely had that entrepreneurship that was admirable. But what really drew me to Alex is that I understood that over the years, despite living that perfect, picture perfect life that you see online, he was dealing with his own traumas and had undergone a divorce, left his career completely in the hospitality business and had gone on to do things that were helping people and created Camp Kaizen, which is an incredible space, which we'll talk about later. And also through his practice, including somatic breath work, parts work, body-mind integration, Alex helps his clients understand themselves, their relationships, their challenges, and their beings. So for me, having undergone a very challenging year in my own life, I'd say that Alex definitely helped me overcome a lot. And that's why I want to share his knowledge and have a conversation with him today. So welcome, Alex.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you both. And yeah, really looking forward to having a chat.
Delving in.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I like to start from the beginning, Alex. I want you to tell us a little bit about your childhood and how you ended up at Leeds University and a little bit about what the early Alex life was about.
Sure. So I'm a London boy, born and bred. I was very fortunate to go to a private school in London called Latimer. From there, I was excited to embark on a trip up north to Leeds University, where a lot of our friends were going. I'd actually been told, as you've already alluded to, that it was a pretty good place to go and have some fun whilst getting a degree. My parents were very encouraging of me to think different. They're a very creative family. My dad's an artist and photographer and property developer. And my mum, was in design before, becoming a full-time mum. I was actually a young actor, so I was actually picked up at school as a budding theatre student by an agent, and at sort of 14, 15, 16 started auditioning for roles, and I managed in my summer holidays to start filming different shows and BBC series and stuff that I watch now, and I'm like, wow, that's cringe. But beautifully fun, and had this sort of belief that actually, okay, this might be something I wanted to pursue. I was actually, though, like it's probably worth mentioning, actually very small at school. So I was everyone was growing around puberty, and then I wasn't. And so I kind of went from being, this kid who was hanging out with all the cool kids to suddenly being new kids were coming in, and I was the small kid. And I was like, what's kind of happened here? And so there was a short period of time at school where it was challenging. There was a bit of bullying, got pulled out of school for a bit whilst we kind of looked at that with my family. And I just remember then like this sort of like very, very sort of clear message, which sort of came through, which was that you will never have to worry if you can build and be bigger and like create for yourself. And so there was a sort of like drive in me. I remember when, we were with our fake IDs and we were 16 years old and trying to get into a nightclub, and all my friends got in and I didn't. And I remember at that point going, okay, I've got to find the way to get into these places. And so I kind of like, that was when this sort of entrepreneurial spark started, whilst I was also doing a little bit of acting. So the acting was this sort of imaginal place where I could sort of pretend to be other people or get validation from the audience or in the theatre shows. And then the sort of the twinned role of starting to run guest lists meant that then I was not being questioned about my age or what I looked like, because I was adding value. So I started to learn quite early on how to develop these different sort of, I guess, like what type of clothes that I needed to wear to dress myself up. And that sort of coincided with, the years leading into university. And I remember having a conversation with my parents, which, I said, look, I've got an agent. Why don't I just continue the acting gig? I'm already starting to make money. I was already starting to do some guest list stuff. And, in my mind, I was like, what's the point in going to university? There's nothing that I was particularly drawn to. Although I've always had a deep interest in philosophy, and I was interested in art naturally because of my parents. And then I was kind of like drawn to the idea that it was very interesting to view the world through the lens of art, like through creative expression. So we had this discussion where I think if I'd like really sort of, really said, look, acting is the be all end all. This is what I want to do for life. I'm sure they would have encouraged me to do that. But instead they said, why don't you go to university, spend 3 years there, work out what you want to do, come down for your auditions, and go and meet people and have fun. So that was probably where we first met.
So why did the acting stop eventually? Because obviously I think when I met you in Leeds, you weren't acting anymore, were you?
No, so I was, the first day I arrived at university, I bumped into one of my best friend's older brother, best friend's older brother's friend, who was a club promoter and had this night or these nights that they were running. And he walked into our halls of residence and said he'd pay me and my best friend £1 for every person that we could, gather from our halls to come to his night that was happening that night. And I think, our guest list was called the Alex and Joe guest list or something like that, like very, very descriptive.
Yeah.
And that kind of kicked it off. I remember that sort of Freshers' Week. That was when we, started drawing around 100 people a night into different experiences and different nights that people wanted to go to. And I very quickly started making, pretty good money for someone at university with a student loan, and thought, well, actually traveling back down to London for my auditions can wait. I'll just continue doing this. And, that opened up the door for me after the first year to decide that actually I'd like to run my own nights. So that was kind of the start of my first business when we were sort of 19 or 20 years old, and whatever I thought a business was, not really realizing.
No, I remember I'd always looked up for my own reasons. Entrepreneurship was something that had always interested me. And I remember thinking specifically that you and the people that were running these nights were displaying that, and there was always some kind of interest to me. Do you think, though, nightlife is an interesting one, because I think when people hear that, there's always negative connotations linked with it, drugs, alcohol, decadence, there's all these things that come to mind when you think of that. Do you think, initially, obviously what I hear is that your childhood and your experiences of bullying and not feeling big enough in a way wanted you to take up space in another way. So you did that in different ways to feel validated and worthy, and that's why you went into that. But do you think that there was negativity? Do you think that it also did something to your ego or your soul in a way, if you look back, or not so much?
I think it's a good question. And I think there's sort of multiple lenses that we could view that. One is through the lens of the perception of who you think you need to be in order to be validated or loved or receive love. And so when we find coping mechanisms or short-term solutions, or where that, we can receive that, and sort of we tend to then, believe that might be the path to follow. So I think from one of the things that it offered me was I was always drawn to wanting to help people. And like I liked bringing people together to have a good time. Like it was like I loved looking out over the club and seeing people dancing and smiling and having fun. Like that really lit me up, and that kind of grew the desire to create more interesting or experiences that integrated sound and light in different ways. I think there was also like an incredible shadow that kind of emerged as a result of starting to believe that I was in some way important, or
I was going to say, I bet you were popular.
He was very popular.
How big
Alex
was
was
the biggest
invited to
party?
everything.
How big was the biggest party? Like, how many people?
a couple of thousands.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but at the
I bet you were popular.
He was really popular. But I'm gonna go on to what Alex did in London. You'll know some of the things he did in London, but we'll go on to that. Go on.
Yeah. So I think it was running guest lists, right? So I think one of the things that you learn is a couple of things that are really beneficial. One is that you get really good at hearing no. Right. So no, I don't want to come to that. No, you like we were going around and flyering and speaking to people and asking everybody to come along, and you'd be like, hey, how are you doing? So you start to learn how to communicate. How does someone relate? You learn a lot of those sort of early skills around how you communicate, and how you invite people somewhere, and whether or not someone likes what you're saying. So you become quite chameleon oriented in the sense that you become skilled at your delivery, and I think that's something that served me well, and also just sort of the immediate feedback loops of this is something that lands, this is something that doesn't. This is how you construct an evening, this is what good looks like, this is what hospitality really means. But on the flip side, you're dancing in an industry that is fraught with excess, drink, drugs, and is, to a certain degree, it can, for those who, it can be a form of escapism, and that can lead, of course, to more destructive behavioral habits, especially if you're trying to study and get a degree, right? I was always very focused on doing everything I did really well. Like that was like what was driven into me, is like by my parents and my dad, from a young age, was like, if I was going to do one thing, do it once properly, not twice, like badly or half-heartedly.
I think it's really nice. We have this discussion all the time. We sit with dentists, and our parents told us to become dentists. Yeah. And the generations, you have
it's the immigrant generation.
Immigrant generation and all that. I think it's really nice that wasn't even, that sort of thing wasn't even on your radar, wasn't, preached on you by your parents. And yet you can turn anything into a successful business. Yeah, it's a funny thing, because entrepreneurship and healthcare don't really mix naturally.
But I think now that's changed with the new generation, because naturally it leads. I mean, Alex will tell you, I don't think he can name one other person that he was friends with that was a dentist or a doctor. I purposefully liked to hang out with people that were in the creatives. And like you said, you loved philosophy. So did I. For A-level, I did English, philosophy, chemistry and biology. That's quite rare to do such different subjects. And so when I chose to live with the people that I did, who you're good friends with and know, none of them did the sciences or the medicines. I was naturally very drawn, and I think it was that entrepreneurship, and that's why I was so desperate to marry that creativity and entrepreneurship with dentistry, and that's why I was one of the first people to take to social media.
What I'm saying is that immigrant mentality that says, my parents, we had a revolution in Iran, we came here, my parents said, become a professional. That's the safest way.
Yeah.
Not the safest way of helping the world. That's the safest way of helping yourself. Yeah. Have a business, and you'll feed your family if you're a professional. So behind it wasn't healthcare and helping. Behind it was financial stability.
100%. Same.
Now, my basic point is that entrepreneurship and healthcare don't mix happily. They don't. Yeah. They don't. I don't want my surgeon to be thinking, how much money can I make out of this guy? I
true.
don't want that. But entrepreneurship and events, nightlife, all the things that Alex has done do mix perfectly. And yet the immigrant doesn't ever say to their kid what Alex's parents said to him like, go do something creative and do it really well.
Yeah.
You know, it's just one step too far for an immigrant to go to because of the risk of what not being a professional is going to do to you.
But you actually I have to just interject because my endodontist, so that's like a specialist within the field of dentistry, he used to run the nights at like Movida and Tantra and stuff like that and do the list. And he used to DJ as well, with Jamie Jones and things, but he was still an endodontist, i.e. he was still a specialist dentist. And it was almost like he was living these double lives, and he would have never quit dentistry to become a full-time DJ or to become a full-time events person. Yeah. And it's almost like, you know, even if you are drawn, like I loved acting, like you said. So this year I was like, oh, I want to go look at doing improv. But it was never an option in my family to leave dentistry to do acting and that's why within my field, I'm doing podcasting, I do TV, because that's the way I can express myself within my field.
Yeah.
Safely.
It'd be super cool though if your kid could write a screenplay, you know, like instead of becoming a orthopedic surgeon. You know? I
mean, I think it's pretty cool to be an orthopedic surgeon. I'm just saying.
I think it sounds like a really interesting sort of like segue. Like what I heard you saying, Payman, which was more related to what is the sponsoring seed of a parent's desire for their child.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you from an immigration perspective is that, you know, security and safety is of utmost paramount, given that that was something that was taken away, you know, or was happened. And it's, you know, with my wife, Sarah, you know, she also moved from former Yugoslavia when she was 2 years old to Canada. So I'm, you know, very familiar about this, what it means to have a safe and secure job, that there can be a career for a long time, that you can then be a provider for. And I think, you know, it's really interesting when we start to look at the intergenerational seeds that have been planted in each of us as it relates to our attachment styles and how we think about risk, and let's also think about risk as like entrepreneurship. And from the other side is what I hear you talking a little bit about, which is this sort of following of your curiosity, the opportunity to bridge your industry and entrepreneurship and move the business in a way onto social media, and to have more influence and to create more awareness around the people that are actually within the industry, rather than just this is a service and we don't know anyone apart from they're in white gloves and, you know, behind the glasses.
One thing that I want to say, I think that's going to be super helpful, is the majority of dentists and doctors are from immigrant families. And we joke and we say the minority is like white people. You have like, I probably had like 4 white dentists in my year, like literally everyone else was Middle Eastern, Asian, you know, from backgrounds where they felt sort of pressured by their family. I think to a certain degree, there's not a rebellious streak, but I think the new generation, and maybe you're seeing this with your own kids, want to do things their own way. And that's why you're even seeing doctors and dentists take to TikTok and Instagram in a way that was never done before, and perhaps pursue more of a financial means through those channels. You know, I meet some younger dentists and they're like, I make more from my partnerships on TikTok than I do in practice, you know? And I think, you know, that is changing slightly. But I think what's interesting is that perhaps they don't know, like you said, where it comes from, you know, where their parents are like, you have to go down this road. And one of the perhaps good things about social media is that we can say, well, actually, being authentically yourself isn't too much of a problem, and you can build a life and a career from that too. But I might be wrong, because you hang out with the younger dentists more than me.
Well, look, social media is just a reality that's going to, media is a reality, right? Media is a reality. Now it's got democratized that everyone has a voice, and that's a nice thing. You know, there's nothing to say. There's plenty of business in healthcare, right? I mean, I had Anushka sitting there, 43 practices. You know, there's some of the biggest companies in the world are healthcare companies, drugs company. There's plenty of business in healthcare. It just makes me sad that advice. I mean, and the question you asked,
what
about,
makes you sad?
Well, the advice that all immigrants give are these simple 3 things that your kids are allowed to do just for the safety thing. But also the question that you were asking, Alex, about, you know, what is it that about him that made him be that guy, and the risks of nightlife and the bad connotations of nightlife businesses. There's bad connotations in every damn business. Yeah, if you want to look.
But I think nightlife even more so because it is
but
also
in every business, if you choose to look at
Of course.
the negative side of it, there are negative things going on in all sorts of areas, right?
I think I can add to this inquiry from the sense that what one piece that I think is really interesting is the when I talked about the sponsoring seed that is kind of like landed within the individual that blossoms as we grow, right? As a related to what you think you should or need or must do based on what your parents want for you. And that seed, and we've talked about it as this sort of pebble that's the first pebble in the pond that kind of drops, which is this sort of understanding that this sort of or misunderstanding of a young child that I will behave the way I think you want me to in order that you love me.
Yeah.
And then that ripples out into schooling. I will behave the way I think you want me to in order to be a good boy at school or a good girl at school. I will behave the way you think I think you want me to in my relationships, in my work, and this sort of pursuit of you mentioned authentic self, or true self or unique self, can sometimes be convoluted with the belief structure that you've inherited from your family about what it means to be, successful in their eyes. And we live in a society that has, certainly in the West, has prioritized the metric of success being a monetary value at the very top, right? That is the measure of whether or not you meet the standards of our Western society comes by normally this scarce commodity of money, however much, whatever, or influence, or how much productivity you can offer. Now, if we're placing that at the top of our personal pyramid, and this is what kind of I think maybe you were starting to allude to, was no amount of, and it was as I left university and moved into a career in hospitality and started working in marketing for nightclubs and restaurants and hotels, and I rose pretty quickly into Morgan's Hotel Group and was running nightclubs like Mahiki before that, and then Bungalow 8, and that's what I started. But so at 25 years old, I decided, with the young hubris of a man who's obviously, done a huge amount of operational learnings. Of course, I haven't in hospitality. Decided to start my own place, and that place was with 3 other friends called Ping in Earls Court, which is this ping pong.
Do you remember it?
Pizzeria.
No, I'm saying I can't believe I missed it.
Yeah, it was really big.
Because Bounce, I went to a lot.
Yeah,
opened at the same time
really?
as Bounce. We were with West London, and I basically pulled all of my team at the time from, Morgan's Hotel Group, but like Bungalow 8, and we had these incredible, mixologists and barmen. We had incredible pizza chefs and this 7,000 square foot place with DJs every night, and we had a barber in there so you could come and get your hair cut. I mean, it was just this experiential thing. And I remember creating that for the love of creating. Yeah. That was the thing that got me, and I was so thrilled with what we were doing. And we had these cool baseball jackets that all the team would wear, and the merch, and that was when it started to pop for us. And we also developed something at the time called Love Brunch, which was this daytime party event that we ran from 12 till 6.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Which then we grew into a 9-year business that I ran with a couple of other partners.
Are you saying that you were telling yourself a story about growth and domination that was unhealthy in some way as well?
What happened to me is after 10 years of doing, or 8-9 years of doing this, when we built our holding company called GLP Hospitality, where we had at its peak 14 different restaurants and bars, a place called Rum Kitchen.
Do you not remember Rum Kitchen?
Yeah,
it was like the place to be in Notting Hill. Like, I remember it's like everyone wanted to be at Rum Kitchen.
And it was fun, and we had celebrities rolling through. David Beckham did his Christmas party. We had Prince Harry there, Harry Styles, all those guys used to come. And, at that time, that would drive more awareness for the business. The business would get busier. We'd open a second one and then a third one. And then we took on private equity, and those guys wanted us to grow quickly. And we were then incubated the business Island Pokey that I used to know. The founder was a family friend. And he came and said, look, come and try this bowl of pokey in our office in Soho. I said, we said, this is amazing. Let's package this up. We turned it from, I think it was called the Hawaiian Fish Co. at the time. And then we rebranded it because we had an in-house design studio. We rebuilt it into something called Island Pokey, raised the capital from a company called White Rabbit, who are an investment firm, and then set out to grow that. And by the time that I exited that, we were at 8 sites, and now I think there are 30. We also opened a place called Foley's, and Foley's we won a Michelin bib for, and then a place called Paso. Now, I think to bring all this back to the original question was, I remember walking into the opening of Paso and feeling like an imposter in my own business. And I had pegged so much at this opening that it was going to make me feel whole. And for whatever reason or not, and I can even feel like the emotions coming, that was when I really had to look at myself in the mirror and going you're trying to live someone else's life. And what I recognized then was that nothing was ever going to be enough when I was looking externally outside of myself to fill the void that I felt within. And it didn't matter how much money we made or whether or not we had money or didn't have money. It didn't matter, how many restaurants we had or how many reviews that came in. Well, I got to a point where I basically burnt out because we were running a company that 250 employees, and at the same time my relationship with my ex we were having some challenging times and as newlyweds, and she just was starting her own healing journey from a more challenging childhood experiences. And I remember this moment walking my dog around the block, and just walking the dog around and around the block, just going, my life has to be mean for more than this. There has to be more to my life than feeling the way that I do at the moment. And I think that's what part of this was coming, because in a sense of the pain that I was feeling within, and the speed at which we were building and growing and running. And when you sometimes look back at WhatsApps and you find conversations that you're having from 8 years ago, and I was just looking at how many moving parts we had, and different investors and different ventures, and we had new pipelines of 10 new businesses that were going, but we were also we had companies that were Peter was paying Paul, and so management structure was becoming a little bit shaky as we'd started to grow, because we're 31 years old, and we didn't have the support, and we didn't know how to ask for help. That's the real crutch here, was mental health in the way that we're having this conversation now wasn't there. I started seeking out secret seminars when I was 28 and started going to different spiritual talks to, make sense of what was going on, and how could I make sense of my relationship, and also why am I so triggered by this person, or why is my body responding in a certain way. And I just remember the more destructive pathways there are to find ways to self-soothe, right? So that would be drink or recreational drugs or partying. So if you've got 14 sites and you can drink and eat for free in every one of those, it is super easy to distract yourself. But whatever happens, I would still wake up with a pit in my stomach that then I would busy myself to relieve. And after a while, that got to a point where there was this sort of very clear moment where I recognized that everything had to change.
Did it happen? I mean, obviously we've talked about this at length, and this is one of the big reasons why I chose you as a coach. You know, I said you walked the walk. So essentially on the outside, you had everything, you know, the perfect relationship, the perfect partner, the perfect business, etc. And everything was building up. But I remember you telling me that one day you walked in, you just, I don't want to say threw it away, but you were like, something needs to change. And it was almost like in a day, everything changed. So tell us about that.
Yeah, it was weird. That just popped a memory where, you know, I think it was the same sort of like month or two where, you know, me and my business partner, Johnny, were, you know, we got the sort of like 1,000 most influential people in London next to Nick Jones and all this, you know, all these sort of heroes of ours. And I just remember, this sort of this feeling that this was like a really important moment for me to, like, everything that I thought that I knew and everything that I thought would make me happy. And I just remember having this like burning question that like landed with me. It was like, what is success? What does it mean to feel fulfilled? And the moment I asked that question, I went to an event, like a friend's experience or event that night, and I got introduced to a friend who was just starting to date this chap called Stuart Salmon, who owns a company called BreathPod now. He'd just been sort of trained as a breath teacher, breath coach, and he said, "Hey, I'm hosting this event. Come along, it's, you know, next week." And I remember going to this experience and lying down in this, I mean, beautiful yoga studio, and there were yoga mats and everything was laid out and beautiful music, and we started breathing. And, you know, I'd never even heard about breath work at that point. I'd tried meditation before, it never landed. I always thought I was doing it wrong. You know, you're sat there waiting to be enlightened, you know, and just hoping that something was going to happen. And I just think that's the way that the instruction has been given, is it hasn't been necessarily landed in the West. And I went to this experience and I started breathing, and I just remember myself leaving my body, and I left my body and I entered this space where I was able to see my life from like this bird's eye view. And it was just so clear to me in that moment that I was able to see my partner's like life, her like, and her as a child, and recognize that, you know, everything that like that we were holding in resentment and judgment against each other as we were sort of navigating now a divorce was like just huge amount of like love and compassion and forgiveness and recognition that, wow, like, you know, we're not tuned to the same level. I can't hear what she's saying and she can't hear what I'm saying, and that's okay. And we can work through that from that place. And at the same time, I was sort of had this sort of like clear moment where I, you know, could see my life in a different way, where I looked happy and was, you know, just kind of free and didn't have the expectations or the pressure. I felt like the man who was holding Atlas for like the majority of my early 20s and majority of my 20s and early 30s. And I remember speaking to Stu after, and he said, "Look, there's this. You should go and speak to my friend. He's a coach." And I said, "Okay, cool. A coach sounds great."
So at this point, were you still working for the businesses, or had you quit?
No. So I was still in the business, and I was navigating what I was going to do. But we were just starting. I was just starting to kind of like have that question with my partners about stepping down at a point when, on the surface, we were absolutely booming. Like everything was, if we'd continued in that vein, you know, who knows what, you know, where it could have.
How did they feel about you presenting stepping down?
It was hard. There was also a couple of things, like the way that our corporate structure was set up. You know, I was able to, you know, I'd released the operational control anyway at that point from Rum Kitchen. So we had brought in a managing director. So all these kind of things that we were kind of doing enabled me to make this move a little easier. Island Pokey was pretty set up then. James was running it. An operational team were moving through. And after the 2 years, they left our sort of incubator office. And we had Foley's and Paso and, you know, the events business and our sort of marketing agency and graphic design agency. I remember speaking with Johnny at the time, you know, and this was like I was separating from him, who I'd worked with for 10 years, and separating from my wife in the same, basically the week. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. And I felt broken, and I was just like, I can't continue operating in this way because it's going to kill me. And that's generally how I felt.
But when you look back on that now, do you see that as, I mean, I'm sure it's a combination of things you see it as, but do you see that as you were going down the wrong line, or do you just see that as your execution was short-sighted? You weren't looking after yourself as you could have taken maybe a day off a week and solved that problem, or do you actually think you were going down an incorrect path?
It wasn't an incorrect path, right? It was that I had completed what I had set out to achieve. Like I talk
So
about.
it wasn't just burnout, mental pressure burnout.
It was just I knew it was enough. I knew that I knew nothing more in this external world of creating for success, for external validation, for financial remuneration was going to hold me. I knew at that time it was this like inner soul calling back to alignment. And I started working with a coach, and I remember this incredible question because it changed my life. He said, you know, imagine yourself looking back 1 year from now. So what are we, the 20? So I can't remember what the date is. Call it
12th of December.
12th of December, whatever day this comes out. 12th of December, looking back 1 year from now. So 12th December 2025. Looking back 1 year from now, what must have happened for you to feel thrilled at your progress? And I just sat with it. And I remember that the answers just came so clearly. And I was like, it was so clear to me that relieving myself of the responsibilities of running this company, the pressure of 365 days worth of revenue stats rolling in every night. Like that was before I went to bed, I'd wait for every single restaurant or bar or, you know, thing to come in. Red or black? Are we up or down on last year?
We have that in dentistry. Yeah, for sure.
That is how black, I'd sleep well. Red, I'd sleep terribly. I would wake up in the morning, and the first thing that would be coming through would be our reviews across. So we'd have a thing that would scrape all of our reviews from all of our restaurants, from all the social media, everything like this. It would categorize them. You know, it didn't matter if there was 95 positive reviews, I would beeline in onto the negative one. And that would be where I'd start my day. I'd be like, what happened? How did this happen? And so I just feel that I'd got to this point where the way I was approaching life, you know, was no longer sustainable. That's what was happening. And I started working with a coach, and the coach helped me breathe life into my, you know, choices. And at that moment I loved the coaching process so much that I was like, I have to train in this. I don't know why, but I just know that these lines of questions, the opportunity that someone gives you non-judgmentally, non-prescriptively to self-generate the answers from within was mind-blowing to me. And so I trained, that started this journey of training as a transformational coach.
And sorry, at this point, you were not earning anything, or were you paid out by your companies?
So no, at that point, this was moving out, and I had a little bit, I was negotiating an exit, but I was also getting divorced. So I was at this point where I was like, I scrambled like what money we had available, and I invested in the coaching. I had no idea whether or not it would really necessarily pay out or how, but I did have this belief that I know that there are more people out there like me that I can offer this service to.
But did the company not have a valuation that you could exit with?
Yeah, company had a valuation, but Rum Kitchen at the time had just taken on investment, and we'd bought out other partners. So I was already. It was like, you're waiting until whatever happens. So we kind of crossed our fingers and hoped that would come good. We were in a negotiation, or I was in a negotiation to exit Island Pokey, and that took about a year from starting that to doing that. And then Foley's and Paso at the time were early businesses, so there was no
You'd reinvested everything you had.
Reinvested. So what I did is I gave my shares to my business partner. I said, look, I can't do this. Have my shares in those 2 restaurants. You crack on. And that was just before COVID. So that's a whole nother story about where we can go. And then I started, and I trained.
You moved in with your parents?
I moved back in with my parents for 9 months. And it was this sort of like real, like coming home. It was this real turning away. I'd also had a pretty, big wedding, a year before that, tons of friends had come. And I just remember this moment of everything changing. And I turned back around from looking out and started looking in.
Yeah.
And in training as a coach, I then was like, I want to train in more stuff. So I was like, okay, breathwork helped me. I'm going to train as a breath worker. And I pursued performance breathing and followed a guy called Laird Hamilton, who's a big surfer, and trained in his breathwork training before breathwork then helped me unlock meditation. And so over the next 7 or 8 years, every year I've added something that has been curious or helped me to better understand myself, better understand my relationships, better understand my my reason for being and how I can be of service, and started to pull together different modalities, interdisciplinary approaches to through my own exploration of self. And that kind of bosomed out into also studying a lot of ancient wisdom and indigenous wisdom and working with plant medicine. And then I trained as a psychedelic assisted practitioner for a year and worked with a lot of different plant medicines to better understand how our reconnection to nature.
I have a question though.
Sure.
Did you go through any moments of real darkness during this time? So you turned your back on the business, your marriage came to an end, you moved back in with your parents, or do you think that somehow you, I don't want to say distracted yourself, but you were on this path where the calling was so strong that you didn't feel the heaviness and the pain, and the tools that you were learning helped you through that period? Because most people would go into a dark hole for a period of time, whether you want to call that depression or, like you said, embark on some sort of self-soothing distraction mechanism.
So I think like I can speak to a couple of things there. Like, there was the funny enough, I think the darkest times were before I quit. That was the quitting was
relief.
Was the relief. And I think like the most important thing that we can have in this type of journey, and our own journey, is to recognize we're on a journey, and that life is the greatest adventure that you forgot to invite yourself on. And there is an opportunity to be hopeful. Now, it's easy to say when you're not in the basement, where everything is caving in on you. What became helpful for me was a daily practice, so I learned how to use my breath to return to my own inner compass. I was very clear that in my mind that this wasn't something that I wasn't going to give up on life. Like this was the threshold that it was calling me to cross in order to grow into or allow myself to like really, really express myself as to who I truly am and what gifts I have to offer to this world.
What are you struggling with at the moment?
I'm struggling with the external worlds, the way in which we're viewing the world through the lens of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, and how impactful that is into so many of our sense of self, safety, and hope. I think.
Sorry, I just want to add there, Payman, that Alex actually doesn't have social media. So the current business that he has is totally built on word of mouth. And I actually heard it through one of my high profile clients. And I was like, I know Alex, because she was like, I've been doing coaching. And then I was like, went to university with him. And then I kept seeing him around in Soho House.
But you don't use social media personally?
No.
I quit
the company doesn't have it.
I quit the day I quit everything.
Personally as well as...
Personally, professionally, everything. And look, I'm not here, I don't believe technology is neither, it's agnostic, it's not good or bad, it's how it's used, right? So if you're using social media or if speaking for myself, if I was using social media to validate how I was feeling, or to receive likes in order to basically help me feel better, it's a short-lived dopamine release, right? Like it's not long-term fulfilling. As a business, Kaizen, which is our company and our interdisciplinary coaching company, where we bring together different practitioners from depth psychologists to functional medicine doctors to different coaches to medicine guides. What we recognized was that actually trying to tell people about our business, which is, one format of doing it via the lens of social media and claim-based outcomes about, your 7 steps to living your best life. Like for me personally, never felt congruent with my own journey. What has felt congruent was allowing people's experience working with us to do the marketing for that ever we needed. So for the last 7 years, the company that we've built has relied entirely on word of mouth marketing and some email marketing around the community that we've built. That's not to say we'll never not use social media, but I don't think we'll ever use it as a sales mechanic. And we will use it when I personally and my business partner feel personally like we have the right frequency of the message to share. And so when you ask me what am I challenged with at the moment, it is the sharing of the right information at the right time for the right person to be able to hear it.
And that's the problem, because social media is so based on clickbait, right? We had this conversation a couple of weeks ago, like even some dentists get really triggered because they'll see other dentists, make a claim that's not that big a deal, but turn it into this huge deal because it's clickbait. Does that make sense? And there is that problem that goes on. Like sometimes I also find myself having to do like polarizing content because I know it's going to do better for my like algorithm. If you
But you don't have to use it in any particular way. I mean, that's the nice thing about it that you.
Yeah, but if you want to do well on social media, you have to go.
You don't. I mean, for instance, Alex is not saying he wants to do well on social media. He's saying.
But if you want to bring business, which is my goal.
Yeah.
And if he does eventually want to bring business through social media, you do have to pivot in that direction.
Hear me out. For instance, I used to obsess on the download numbers
of the podcast. Really?
I haven't looked for the last 6 months.
Really?
I've not looked. I don't care anymore. Yeah, and
I reckon it's higher.
Probably. Not that I was making any changes based on the numbers, because it's not as easy in a podcast.
But also, you're not relying on the podcast to bring you income. The podcast is something, but people that rely on social media to bring them brand partnerships, or if they get paid per download on YouTube.
In any event, let's imagine he wants to use social media as his main marketing engine. The nature of the way that he would use it would be in line with Kaizen.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be clickbait.
And of course, so it's like, what is the the use of the technology and what is, if you want, a closed loop return, which always terrified me a little bit, because when I brought on private equity into our business, we used to create into the hospitality business, we used to, create incredible experiences. We used to do events for Rum Kitchen, like at the carnival. You would do things that didn't have a clear closed loop marketing
ROI,
return. But when we took on private equity, these guys, they were, wanted to cut those things out, which was actually, the brand partnership stuff that you did. You didn't have the tools then to necessarily close the loop.
Do you kind of regret bringing in private equity? Because a lot of dentists grapple with this. They have maybe two practices.
Totally.
And then they're thinking, should they be 30 practices?
Massively, and...
So do you think you would have carried on more organically without it?
It was at that time, we were going through, a casual dining boom, and you've got multiple partners, and you've taken money from friends and family, and you're hopeful that you can return some of that money and the trust and the hope that they gave you. And in doing so, you have this, the world is presented in a way that you will become happy once you have more money, and once you have a house and a second house, and you can send your kids to X, Y, and Z, or do however it is, or in some variation of that. And so I think, like, there's a great quote, which I'm sure you've heard before, but like, comparison is the thief of joy.
Of course.
And the reason that I came off social media was because I recognized that I was losing my sense of self. Like, I wasn't able to create from that place that I needed to, that I wanted to, because I was looking at what the next restaurateur was doing in LA and going, I tell you what, we should do a version of that. Like, what is actually like coming through me, what is asking to be created, actually, like, there's this, when Rick Rubin talks about it, that there are, there are ideas like in the universal cosmic, sort of sky above us, let's call it, that when we tune to that frequency, we can receive information. So meditation, breath work, these are opportunities for me to actually like align myself with what is being either, what is within me that wants to be birthed, or what can I receive from that is asking to be created. And that's really what I help people do now, which is asking people very clearly, like, what is your heart longing for? Because the head will tell you a ton of other things, right? Of what I think when you hear yourself saying, I should, I need, I must, that is when we have subordinated to societal ideologies about what we think we should be doing.
Yeah.
Right? So you talked about depression before. Depression, the best description that one of our depth psychologists, termed it, which I thought was amazing, or at least gave a good descriptor, was the comparison of your current reality to the fantasy of the life that you think you should be living.
Love that.
Yeah. I was like, wow. Okay. If that is the descriptor, well, social media is a pretty good, when used in that way, well, you can trace back a lot of our own current societal problems, to the way in which we believe that we should, need, or must act in order to be happy, successful, loved, or valued.
I've got a question for you. Do you think that since you embarked on your own professional journey and where you are now, do you ever get depression?
I don't label I don't pathologize my experiences as depression or as anxiety. The way that I have come to understand myself is through different lenses of understanding how my psyche works. So one in particular that I find very helpful, that I'm also trained in, is internal family systems.
Yeah, which we've done a lot of.
We've done a lot of, right? So
what is it?
So yeah, explain to the audience.
Internal family systems is developed by a beautiful, psychotherapist and psychologist called Dick Schwartz. It's built from, he was a family therapist, and recognized after a series of sort of, of a 30-year career of working in family constellations, that actually we have an inner family that exists within us. So I'll give you a sort of the broad brush strokes. there's a part of you that, wants to, eat the chocolate bar, and a part of you that says, you've had enough chocolate today. Okay, can you see those two parts?
Sure.
Yeah. Can you see the part of you that's observing those two parts now? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you can imagine that part's observing, the part that's observing those two parts is self. So in the meditative practice, when people, through Eastern practices of meditation and kind of my training, you would be taught to become the observer of your thoughts. So in this instance, instead of becoming the observer of your thoughts, where you can recognize that these are just things that are passing by and you can choose whether or not to attach to the story or the ruminating thought or return to self. And you can use your breath to do that, and a practice of, meeting the moment where it's at all times, right? So the internal family system is that I can observe a part of me that might be feeling upset, or that a part of me that's feeling protective, or a part of me that's feeling scared, or a part of me that's feeling hopeful. And so rather than allow myself to become the story or the experience, which I think so many of us get caught with, where you drop and drop into that space of darkness, we have different practices that are able to help us create maps for the psyche that can help us create some space in between stimulus and response. As Viktor Frankl would say, is a space. And in that space is our power to choose how we respond. So one of the things that I teach and I've worked with, Rhona on, is recognizing when we're blending into a part of us that's more of our managerial protective part, or more of our firefighter part, and giving us the opportunity to recognize, wow, there's an inner child part that it might be seeking our attention. Now, that inner child part, when it's being neglected or when it's being ignored, is more likely to start to, will try and get your attention.
Act out.
If we're sat around a family table right now and the little one of your children is asking for your attention and you continue to ignore it and cross the door to the table, what's it going to do?
No, you've even brought this up. You've brought this up many times in these conversations.
It's going to act out. So one of the things in this model and through this lens that I really found so incredibly empowering was, wow, that the inner child or the part of me that is seeking my attention may start, saying things in order to get my attention. And those might be intrusive thoughts that limit me.
It's not you, though.
It's one of the parts
self,
of you, right?
Yeah, self can't, in this model, like self is, unique self, the self that is.
So it's such a useful way of looking at it.
But what's really hard is, what I found is that people that haven't done this kind of work really find it difficult, and it's really hard to give people grace. One of the things that me and my partner argue about a lot is, because he's not done this kind of work, he's a little bit more black and white thinking. Yeah. So if you've not, whereas he doesn't understand where I have empathy. I'm going to bring up a little bit of a controversial subject. So this whole thing with the Luigi Maggioni, the guy that just killed, right? So my partner is very much I think it's absolutely dreadful that people are celebrating someone that killed another person, and the person that he killed really didn't have that much control over an entire system that's flawed. And he was like, it's just madness. Now, there was two parts to this, because on the one hand, he was like, the reason the internet is celebrating it is because the guy is good looking, because if he was a redneck, Trump supporting, hating American guy, everyone would be like, a redneck killed this dude, it wouldn't even have made the news in the same way. Or even if it was, an immigrant or a black person or anything like that, he was like, it would hit differently. So that was one part, how social media idolizes looks, as it were. And then the other part was, how can we celebrate someone that's killed someone? But obviously the part side of me and all the work that I'm done, but you never understand. Of course, I'm not going to go around murdering people that I'm angry with. But until you've been in that person's shoes, it's the same with the Menendez brothers, for example. You can't really know what is going on for that person, what their history was, what that part of them was. Of course, I'm not saying killing someone easy, but I have empathy for people.
Look, I think everyone in prison needs a conversation and talk and understanding, and whoever's committed a crime. I find what you said particularly useful, in so much as sometimes a tension between two behaviors that are both useful but opposite.
Yes.
Someone like you.
Tell me.
You are who you are. You've become who you've become because you haven't sat back and sat on your laurels. You've constantly pushed. And yet, what you need more than anything is peace And being at peace is almost like being content. And being content to you is almost like a dirty word, because if you were content, you wouldn't be the type of person to keep pushing.
Well, that's what he always says to me.
Yeah.
So-
and yet when you can separate those and say, these are both part of me, now it serves me to look at contentment. Now it serves me. If you've got the
Knowledge.
ability to change the way you look at it, that's it's amazing.
And
it's
that's
a wonderful thing.
Therein lies your freedom, right? Because
you choose.
we develop protective parts that come online at a younger age to protect the inner child part of us. So something that might happen, okay, if we're not getting attention, well, the part of us that might be too hard for the child at that developmental model, and during its sort of attachment stage, to work out actually how it's feeling, because it actually feels so overwhelmed. And in this model, a part, that's traditionally when a protective part comes online, that protective or more managerial part, well, I tell you what I'm going to do is I know how to make us, actually receive attention. So I'll start getting good grades. I'll start performing well. I'll start building businesses. I'll start X, Y, and Z. So we develop these parts of ourselves that can help us overcome our challenges. Now that's great, and that's all well and good. And there's no such thing as there's no bad part here. It's just acknowledging when we've blended into one at the cost of the other. So if we're all go, 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 so to talk to my own story, I was probably seeking attention, in some way, shape or form. I wanted to be validated. I was small. I didn't feel that at that time that I was being seen. So I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be loved. I was small. So, I thought the girls were taller than me. So it was, harder to find a girl who was short and kind of, looked and, wanted to be with the short guy. So, that part of you then develops some really clever coping mechanisms about how it can be seen, how it can be loved, how it can be validated. And to use my own story, speaking for myself, what I was able to see was that after a while, that part of me exhausted the body, because it's operating from a place where it was burning out, because there was no stopping it. It was like, I know how to make us feel better. I know how to help us be seen. And after a while, I recognized, wow, like actually in doing this work, and I've trained in breath work, as I said, and multi-year initiation into plant medicine, and I spent times with different tribes and lived in the jungle and sat in different meditation halls and worked with different schools of Eastern practices to actually learn how to return to myself, like the part of me that can actually, the self can hold all parts of me, the inner child, the protective part, the firefighter part, and to be able to, instead of being the part that's holding the Atlas ball that I talked about, actually self can hold all of it. It can feel supported and held by, if you want to go sort of super woo-woo, but the sort of the cosmic father, the cosmic mother, the cosmic child, like the opportunity to be held by the universe itself. When we think about, and like this, you've asked about darkness or depression, and I talked about this sort of architecture of hope. I'm fascinated by the world. I don't want to leave it. I want to be in it. I don't want to ascend out of it. I want to learn how to live here as full of joy and inspiration and hope, because I see people and I work with people and I know, and I can see through, and that's why I didn't realize, I thought everyone had it, but I can see through your part that's protecting the inner child. I can see that child that seeks to be heard, loved, to be held, to be told it's going to be okay, to be told it's safe.
That's empathy, though.
That is empathy. That is the capacity to see, to your point, beyond the action of
exactly
that person.
I think that is extremely rare. And the thing is, when you said, what's the thing about that you struggle with the most? Well, Payman asked about that. The thing that I struggled the most is that people aren't truly seen and accepted for who they are. And it's so funny, because when you enter the realm of healing and when you go delve into this more, and now you've heard so many of our speakers, empathy is something that isn't present in a lot of people. The judgment, even think about it in dentistry, right? The GDC, the governing bodies, you know, like, shame on you, your action was bad. There is never, like, society is not built on understanding people. Society is built on this, like, capitalist punishment. And I don't, listen, like, I'm not this...
And yet it's in everyone, you know?
Exactly.
And his role in getting it out of everyone.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing.
And also, just like Marshall Rosenberg, another incredible psychotherapist and author of Nonviolent Communication, you said this statement, which we've shared before. This quote: "Every projection and judgment is a tragic expression of an unloved need." Now, that every projection and judgment is a tragic expression of an unloved need. So the judgment that we see in others is actually a response to some tenderness inside us.
Debt,
Yeah? That unloved need. So if you think about the unloved need, well, that is the need of the inner child, who now sees something happening that he's been or she's been told or wasn't able to do or feel as a child. Then when they see it in the external world, it is perceived as a judgment, as something that we want to remove or tell you off. Now, we live in a more left hemispheric orientated society. It's more logical, rational, organizing, practical. This is how things are. These are the rules. We live in Britain. You know, this is the hierarchy of how things should, need, or must be done. The right hemisphere is more intuitive. It's more, accessing of the more feminine archetype within us. It's more accessing of wisdom and inner knowledge and inner knowing. Now, the work is that the opportunity here is that everyone has access to all of themselves, right? It's just so many of us have built walls around our hearts for good reason, to protect ourselves, right? To self-defend, and to know and to see that every single person on this planet, our job on this planet, through speaking for myself, is to take care of every single human being, every single plant, every single tree, every single, bird in the sky and fish in the sea, in a sense that when we fall back in love with ourselves, and we will fall back in love with nature. There's a lot of tired activists. We fall back in love with nature. By dint of that, we'll fall back in love with ourselves. We can't not, because it's the relationship, and the relationship that exists in all of us and in life is to deeply reconnect to that which is most meaningful, which is ourself. And where you can find it, that's the beauty, is that there are so many different pathways. There are so many great...
Do you think that information itself can be enough, or do you think it has to go hand in hand with something like breath work or with plant medicine?
Let's talk a little bit about the plant medicine.
Yeah, so... two things. So I love a quote by Lao Tzu, said, "In the pursuit of knowledge, man adds one thing every day. And in the pursuit of wisdom, he subtracts one thing every day." And so to that context, like, information isn't embodied. Information is through the mind, so it's not enough to know the knowledge. You have to embody the wisdom. So we have to be able to connect to our bodies, connect to our heart, to understand how to live in a way that is more aligned with our true nature. The challenge that we're faced with is, like, now we've got pop psychology, we've got bite-sized pieces of information. Everyone is now an expert on trauma. Like, we all we're able to talk in a way that kind of we understand it. But do you really understand it?
Yeah.
Do you really know what it feels like to be at the bottom of the pit where everything in your life feels like ash gray? Like, and yes, you asked me before, there have been times where I have been there.
But do I have to have been there? Can't you?
Yes, you don't. And thank God you haven't, right? And the reason for being it is, like, there's another quote I like, and I'm sorry to give you tons of quotes, but, Rumi said, like, don't take advice from someone who hasn't left home.
That's why I chose Alex.
Yeah, like, cool. Like, find people, if you're struggling with something, there are tons of people out there. The hardest thing is that we don't know how to ask for help. That's what I'm so grateful for, because I'm not making social media wrong here. I'm just noticing, like, and it's offering people such vantage points now to like what to explore, and things like what you're doing with podcasts as such allow people to have more long form conversations. I'm so grateful for it, because there is the most fun thing is that I've noticed is that follow your curiosity, right? Your hardships, your challenges, like from a sort of Stoic perspective, challenge, it challenges it's what's in your way, it's on your way. It's recognizing that in this culture, and I can talk now to Camp Kaizen, which is our retreats, offering, introduces the idea of rites of passage for the modern world. Now, in ancient and original and indigenous cultures, rites of passage were woven into the fabric of society. There were demarcations from maid to maiden to mother to grandmother to sage to no one. There was demarcations for men who would go from boy to adolescent to man to sage to no one. These demarcations would be met by initiatory practices, whether or not that's plant medicine, whether or not it's a vision quest out in nature, whether or not it's fasting or meditative practices. They recognized in original cultures that in order for, let's call a boy in this context, that a boy would leave the bosom of his community and his home and would leave to go out for the first kill or blood, in order to make that transition to manhood or adolescent, whichever place we're speaking to. The mothers would know that some of those boys wouldn't return, but they would recognize that in going through that experience, the boy would be brought to his knees to recognize what he was actually capable of without the support of the environment that he'd grown up in.
He'd be forged.
He'd be forged, yes. Now, in the West, we've lost access to these practices. So, but willed or unwilled, the soul requires initiation. Okay? So when you're talking about these moments in time, this now in the West presences us more on the back foot. In the indigenous and original cultures, it was met on the front foot. In the West, we meet it on the back foot. Mental health challenges, chronic health challenges, addiction, the loss of a loved one, burnout, divorce, addiction. The way that I perceive these things, and through this lens of rites of passage and soul work, is that we meet these initiatory experiences, but we don't have a cultural container that can help us make sense of them. So when we think, actually, oh my God, that person is like, using drink and drugs to, numb his feelings. Actually, it's a very clear indication for me that he is vibrating, or she is vibrating out of alignment with his true or her true nature, and is ready to step into the next chapter of their initiatory, through an initiatory process into becoming.
But a lot of people would argue, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate, right? Because I'm at the side of both types of conversation, that is a person that is weak of character. Now, they would say that person, there are two people that are suffering from two similar things. One indulges in drugs and drink, the other doesn't indulge in drugs and drink. And then people would celebrate the person that doesn't because they're strong, it's survival of the fittest, etc. I have a completely different point of view because of my empathy side. I think it's more complex. We know through the work of Gabor Mate as well that addiction isn't clear cut, that people are more predisposed to being addicts as well, and we need to provide a space for those types of people. One thing that I would say is that I do think with social media and pop psychology and so forth, people have been a little bit too indulgent in their self-diagnosis. And instead of working towards becoming better, as it were, or working towards a life that they feel is more fulfilling, they're like, I have this condition and that's that. And they just indulge in all the information about their condition rather than moving towards getting better.
Yeah. And I think that the critical word there was self-diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
So, what we want to do is try and meet people where they're at, right? So the judgment that we can project onto someone, is an opportunity to look at where's that
yourself
coming from? Okay, how clean is your house, right? One. The second part is we all have our own quote unquote vices, like the areas in which we go to for relief of X, Y, and Z feeling, symptom, pursuit. So what I think is like, what is important is that you're talking about like the self-indulgence comes potentially, but like internally it's going to be very self-critical, right? Because the projection is, oh, I don't care, this is kind of my thing, I don't care, like blah blah blah. But actually the internal voice is going to be very harsh, the critic will be very harsh, which is why we tend to be drinking or relieving in some contexts. I'm not saying all, I'm saying some, and I'm certainly not here to pathologize. Why am I talking about rites of passage for the modern world, right? Is what we've recognized over the last 5 years or more, 6 years of running different retreats and working and introducing different forms of rites of passage is that, there is a requirement for stepping out. The rites of passage tends to follow sort of 3 chapters. One is the separation from that which like is your comfortable zone.
Sure.
Then there is the stage of liminality. The liminality is where you move to a place, or you go on retreat, or you spend time, in a different country, X, Y, and Z, where the rules of your societal upbringing don't apply. You can dress up, you can dance, you can be free, you can play different characters, you can learn about different things about yourself. And at some point, there is the conceptualization of the return. Once you have gone through an experience where you have placed yourself in an environment or an experience where you learn more about yourself, and you can then return with the gifts of that, those of that inquiry. Plant medicine experiences, working with ayahuasca, psilocybin, these types of experiences are built on this premise, right? Was that these were initiatory practices that people would engage with at threshold moments or transitional moments in their life to help them realign with their soul purpose, their soul nature. It wasn't prescribed. It wasn't like, you do this and then you're going to go and do these 12 steps. Like it was offered to them that it would become self-generated, that you would be able to find the answers within. And so in a world which is fighting for our attention, it's very difficult to find the time and space to actually listen to what is emerging from within. That's why we design these experiences. We take people away into beautiful, deep nature, habitats where we engage in ancient practices, where we honor ancient practices with the wisdom keepers that are still maintaining those practices, and help you apply that in modern applications for today. Whether or not we work
I was going to say, leaders. Is there lots of like CEOs? Is it what kind of people come on the retreat?
Although the majority of my clients are CEOs, are leaders, are public figures, we work with people, like we have a predisposition and a desire to work with people who seek to live life at their growth edge, who recognize that their life is an opportunity for this great adventure. And to recognize that healing doesn't need to be this dark, this heavy, this painful place, right? Like you spoke to Gabor Mate. Gabor Mate would say that trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens in the body as a result of what happens to you. Okay? And on the flip side, I would say we are trying to create spaces of unconditional love, right? Where unconditional love isn't what happens to you, it's what happens in your body as a result of what happens to you. Is to create more opportunities where people can gather in community, where you can be seen and met without your title, without your label. So yes, we do tend to work with people who are seeking to pursue and create in an authentic expression of themselves and in service of something greater than themselves. And more often than not, we do find that CEOs and leaders are people who have driven themselves to the brink in order to be seen, to be loved, to be
Yes,
valued,
true.
as a relationship to how they feel about themselves.
I think it's so super interesting. You know, right now we're interested in original cultures. How did Neanderthals eat? How did they have sex? Or we're so interested in that right now.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in the 60s people were,
Yeah.
you know, that whole hippie thing and free love and all that. And I remember in the 90s it became like that a bit. In the dance culture, it became all these tribal gatherings and all of that. And it's an interesting thing that society kind of goes through this phase every 30 years or so. And you know, where's the next one? And the 70s, I remember my mum telling me, everyone said don't drink mother's milk, and science took over and powdered milk to go. And here we are with AI now, and where the next decade's going to go, it's going to be very interesting.
It's going to be wild.
Like, it's not by mistake that you're into this. I mean, my friend, the McKinsey bro, went to Peru and did ayahuasca. You know, like it's become a it's become a
It's a
thing.
whole
that
movement.
society-
It's a whole
movement.
It's a movement that needs to, and this is the thing, like requires the right safeguarding, the right preparation, the right integration, because these experiences can be very bewildering. They can be very opening, and you have to be. And I'm not saying, I don't believe that psychedelics are on a state that's like categorically. I don't believe it's for everyone, and that's not because you've got to be of a certain ilk, but it is important to have the right type of resources, the right type of people around you, the guardrails. And there's a lot of neo shamans, like people, you know, presenting themselves in ways without necessarily. I don't mean to make that wrong. I'm just cautious of anyone or any business that doesn't have, you know, the right type of harm reduction built into it. And that was something that we were very, you know, we're very intentional about, is knowing what lane do we play in, who can we work with.
What does it cost to come to the thing, to the camp?
So,
Do you want to go pay?
So it starts from 2,250, and that is for the 5-day retreat, and then there's 2 weeks of preparation and 2 weeks of integration afterwards.
Super
and then
reasonable.
We have a community support called the Unwind Club, which is an online and offline group that continues to meet every Monday.
There's no ayahuasca in that.
No. That's it. It's an online breath work and meditation journey for
He
our
wants
kind of
the
community.
ayahuasca.
No, I didn't say that.
And the retreat in April, so April 9th to 13th, and we've got another one in August. That's where we work with psilocybin, and we integrate psilocybin and breath work into that ceremony.
So one thing I want to say to you is, because this is something that a lot of people ask me, and you know, we haven't got a long time, but I think this is an important point to address for people that say that anyone that really wants to help people in the way that you have should have a psychotherapy degree. Now, I want to kind of address the elephant in the room, because sometimes I get asked that by psychotherapists that I know, or friend psychotherapists, because they're like, it can be so dangerous treating clients with all these plethora of issues and traumas if you're not a trained psychotherapist. And obviously I have a therapist and I have you, so I don't really fall into that camp anyway. But what would be your response to that?
So look, I think it's a beautiful question, right? And I think there are a lot of, you know, part of our team are incredible psychotherapists and depth psychologists. So we naturally are fascinated with the mind. Modern psychotherapy was developed in the 1950s, just to give you some context of like how long we're actually talking about practice that's been around for 70 years with new and evolved therapies and developing. Psychotherapy traditionally divorces the mind from the body, divorces matter from spirit. I think there are alternative pathways, but it's super important that the person who you're working with, you feel comfortable as it relates to your attachment style around safety and how you feel heard. I find that people who are very strongly opinionated about something often have their own judgment and self-critique of themselves. So it's a projection once again. The person who needs to basically clarify why you should or shouldn't work with someone, there's a beautiful mirror for them to also look for themselves. And short of that, I don't think it needs to be one or the other, right? I personally feel that healing and growth and the opportunities for magic and understanding what's available in this world. There are more traditional, more allopathic models. One of the challenges I find is when symptoms are diagnosed and then treated by things like, but with some medicines that actually don't help you get to the root cause of the problem. So the approach that I take is we look at the holistic person as a whole. We look at mental, physical, relational, and spiritual domains. We work with people. So with our team, we will have an onboarding with us, and based on based on that onboarding and what you're more drawn to, you might start with one of our psychotherapists and then move to one of our coaches, or move to one of our medicine workers, or move to one of our guides. I think the thing that I come back to, which is probably the important piece, is for me, the people that I've worked with and I've been fortunate to work with some very wise and very, wise teachers and elders in this space. And personally, I like to work with people who've left home.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think really the answer is that you're doing it responsibly. I think that it's important to do your due diligence. There are coaches online. I have been stung by a coach before. And I think that working with Alex, you're very responsible. You only take on certain clients. You make sure that you adhere to a program for a certain amount of time. You refer. And I think that's the message that I give to people. There are good therapists, there are bad therapists, there are good coaches, there are bad coaches. And I think the multidisciplinary approach with Kaizen is what's definitely helped me. Why are you laughing at me?
Tell me about your little girl. Like, what's your little...
Listen, we don't have time. I don't have time to go into it.
What does your little girl say? Go on, what's the headline?
Look, the little girl always feels like she's not enough and not heard, right?
Why?
He's always obsessed with this. He's like, why? Your life is perfect. It's
No,
not
why?
perfect.
No, what happened? What happened back then?
I think, look, there's a plethora of things, and this is not Rhona session time, okay? If you want to find out more, you're going to have to do this offline. But what I do want to say is, Alex, before we end, could you please share with everyone the website? Because as I said, Alex does not have social media. Yeah. It's through word of mouth. Could you please tell us what your website is if people want to look further?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, both of you, for having me, and it was a wonderful conversation. I hope we can do it again. Yeah, you can find more access to us at www.Kaizn.co. That's www.Kaizn.co, and that's not with an E.
Okay, I love that so much. Yeah. Do you have a final question for Alex, as in like one of the profound ones that you ask?
No, I just wanted to know
he wants to know more about
why
the
little girl is not enough. Like, that would be nice after 38 episodes.
Okay, do you want to end with that after 38 episodes? He says he wants to know why. Go on, I don't mind telling the dental world. Yeah. Why does the little Rhona not feel enough?
Beautiful. Oh, you want me to ask?
Yeah, you know me, Alex, now.
In one line.
It's not that she doesn't feel that she's. It's not that she doesn't feel that she's not enough. It's that you're not spending enough time with her.
Okay.
She's disconnected from her.
Yeah. So the opportunity here is to find and steal those quiet moments for yourself.
Yeah.
To ask her what she would like to do.
Instead of shutting her up.
Instead of shutting her up or pushing her away or telling her that she's too busy.
Yeah.
And we have an opportunity to reparent ourselves, and healing begins by reclaiming the parts of us that we have either pushed away or suppressed, and we can walk them home by just bringing them into our awareness.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Alex. What a great conversation. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.